Hi everybody, it's Papa Rock. You know my video, my last one, about the kitchen gadgets, where I showed you all of my kitchen gadgety stuff, and I showed my fork, the one that used to belong to my granny? One of you, and I can't remember who, pointed out that that fork is about 100 years old, and it made me think more in depth about my granny. Of course, every time I use the fork, I sort of think about her. It gives me a little twinge of pleasure, I think, when I use the fork. But I hadn't thought about her for a while. And this story that I'm about to tell you shows how extraordinary a woman she was. Sort of. Now, my granny, I told you, was born in 1990. She got married in 1910, and she and my grandfather decided to immigrate to Canada. And they landed in Montreal, and they stayed there all of their days. They're actually both buried on top of Mount Royal. Anyway, through a series of events, I don't know how to tell you this part. Anyway, my family, my parents and my sister and I, we ended up in Montreal. Now, I was about 8 years old when we finally went to Montreal, and I got to know my grandparents a little bit better. And my parents and I and my sister, we lived in an apartment building, which was a 3-floor walk-up, about 3 miles or so away from where my grandparents lived. And I remember when I was about 11 years old, my mother kept me out of school for a week to take care of her. She had a bad back, and I guess it must have seized, and she wasn't able to get about, and so she kept me home to take care of her while she wasn't well. And during this period of time, the apartment building, the stairwells, and the common areas were all being painted by a small group of painters. And for this week that I was home with my mother, I was in and out of the apartment all the time, like taking garbage to the garbage chute, going down to the laundry room, going to the little variety store to get milk and bread and stuff. And these painters they started on the 3rd floor where our apartment was and worked their way down. So I had a nodding relationship with them. In any case, I was doing laundry and went down to the laundry room to get my load of laundry out of the dryer. And one of the painters, the one that had been up on our 3rd floor and that I had this nodding relationship with, was in there working with some of the stuff that the painters had. They had set up their buckets and their paints and stuff in the laundry room and sort of worked from there. So he was, I don't know, cleaning brushes or whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyway, he saw me and he beckoned me over to him. And I was a nice little kid, very easygoing and not afraid of much, and very gregarious, and I went over quite happily, and he pulled his penis out of his pants to show me. Now, in my memory, I recall something that is absolutely extraordinary, probably the most extraordinary penis that I've ever seen. It hung to his kneecaps, or at least it did in my memory. Now, I also remember being a bit startled by this, understanding that this isn't common behavior that one would encounter in a laundry room. So he was smiling at me and stroking his penis, and I turned around and ran out of the laundry room and up the stairs to tell my mother. My mother, of course, was horrified. She was quite excitable sometimes, and had me call my granny. And as I said, my granny lived 3 miles or so away from where we were. She got in a taxi, and she came right over. And she brought with her her kitchen broom. And she came up to see my mother and me, and I watched her go downstairs and beat that man over the head with a broom. And while he was cowering in the corner, protesting, the superintendent came along and called the police, and long story short, the painting crew, said that I probably walked in on him while he was urinating in a bucket, which also isn't common behavior for a laundry room. But that was my granny. I could just see her chasing this man down the street with her broom waved over her head. She was just a little old lady, 5'1" maybe, looked a lot like the Queen Mother of England, if you recall the Queen Mother of England. And she was my savior. Very powerful, very vibrant, very wonderful woman. And I like to think that a bit of her resides in me. I wish I had a picture to show you, but I don't. That's it, that's all.